Your hourly rate is limiting your potential. I want to talk to you about why that is and what you can do about it. But first, I want to take you back to the 80s. I grew up in the 80s when, to be a success, you needed to have a corporate 9-to-5 and wear a suit. But that isn't what it looked like in our family. My mum was a single mum, and she couldn't make a 9-to-5 work around her 2 children. So she chose an entrepreneurial route. Other parents in the council estate in the seaside town where I grew up made a living working in tourism. They had jobs in shops, or they were dinner ladies at school. They couldn't make a 9-to-5 work either. My mum, she made a living by hosting language students from the local language school. They'd come and stay with us from all over the world, and they'd stay with us for anything from 2 weeks to 10 months. And my little sister and I grew up giving up our bedrooms for them. When I grew up, I decided that that wasn't how I wanted to make a living. So when I was 19, I moved away and I got my dream job. I became an accountant and I got to wear a suit. And I experienced huge social mobility with that job. Fast forward to my 30s, I was making a comfortable living, paying my mortgage. I'd just got married and I was thinking about having a baby for the first time. When it dawned on me, I couldn't make a 9-to-5 work either. I could either continue my professional 9-to-5 job, or I could spend time with my daughter. I believe that the hourly rate is limiting particularly female potential, and I want to talk to you about a better way. Now, I still had to make a living. So, like many female professionals, what I decided to do was to become a freelancer. I became a freelance bookkeeper, and the first challenge I faced was working out how much I could be paid. So I went onto Google, and I typed in, how much does a bookkeeper get paid? And I learned that I could be worth anything from £15 an hour to £30 an hour. Now, I've been an accountant for years. I should be worth the top of that scale. But at the same time, if you've ever returned to work after having a baby, you'll know that my confidence was at an all-time low. I doubted myself. I told myself that that year I'd taken out of work had devalued me. I said things like, my skills are rusty, or I can't possibly be worth as much as another bookkeeper who can take calls outside of baby nap times. So I settled on £25 an hour, and maybe that sounds okay. Given the hourly rate in the UK for an employee in 2016, when my daughter was a baby, was £13.66, that sounds okay. But when you factor in that as a business owner, I had costs to pay, I'd have to pay tax on my profits. Actually, for every £25 that I billed, I only took home about £12. And out of that, I had to pay for childcare just for the luxury of going to work. The only way that I could earn more was to work more hours. And that is the exact opposite of the reason why I'd become self-employed. And I thought, well, this is so hard. Okay, my mum was entrepreneurial. What did she do? I grew up in a 3-bedroom, semi-detached council house. My sister had the box room at the back. I had a much bigger bedroom, which I always told her, with 2 beds in it. And then my mum had the other bedroom at the front. What happens when you host language students is you have people coming from all over the world, and they'll stay with you for different lengths of time. Usually, the students who've come from countries like Japan will stay for much longer. So typically, we'd have a 14-year-old Japanese boy staying in my sister's bedroom for 10 months of the year. Then we'd have students coming from Europe. They come from Italy or Spain, and they'd stay with us for 2 weeks or 2 months, and they'd stay in my bedroom. And then my sister and I would go and sleep in with my mum. But my mum was an entrepreneur, so when the language school called her and said, could we have an extra student for a couple of weeks, my mum, of course, said yes, and she gave up her own bedroom, and then the 3 of us would go and sleep downstairs in the lounge. Now, I'm sure that any entrepreneur in this room would be thrilled to increase their revenue by 25%. So was my mum. So when the language school called her and said, could she have a 5th student to stay, she just bought another bed and put it in her bedroom. Now, we've got 2 ways to pay. And what's important to know is that my mum wasn't limited by hours, she was limited by beds instead. So we could be paid by the hour, or we could be paid for beds or units. But there must be something else. What about value? When I think about the language students arriving at our house, I always picture this dark and stormy night. We'd have a minibus pull up outside, and this poor, bewildered student would get out of the minibus with a massive suitcase and come down the stairs to the front door, and you really had to feel for them. They just arrived in a town they didn't know, at a house they didn't know, with a family they'd never met, and they barely spoke the language. And what my mum could have done is taken them up to their bedroom and got them settled in for the night. But she did this amazing thing instead. She sat them down at the kitchen table and she cooked them what I now think of as international comfort food. She cooked them an omelette because she knew that if they had something to eat, they'd go to bed, they'd sleep better, and everything would feel so much better in the morning. And it did. And then they would write home to their families and tell them how well they'd been welcomed and how they were settling in. And a few weeks later, we would receive a card or a box in the post, and it would have origami paper from Japan or a book about castles from Luxembourg, because their parents were just so grateful that their children were being looked after well. And then, a few years later, what would happen next is the same family would be looking to send the younger sibling to the UK to learn English. They'd remember that amazing experience and send them to the same language school. And they'd specifically request us as their host family because they knew that my mum was going to take care of them. Now, what you could see as an act of kindness, of making an omelette, or just a really good bit of customer service, was actually an act of creating long-term financial impact for the language school. That's value. And how can we pay for that? Let me tell you about another example of value. My friend Steph is a bookkeeper. She's highly experienced. And she was recently working with a small business who were on the brink of collapse. They were running out of cash fast, and it looked like they were going to have to make 30 people redundant. Now, Steph looked at their accounts, and she knew something was wrong. She went on to recover £25,000 of overpaid tax, and then she found £250,000 of savings that meant that that business could continue to trade and save 30 jobs. Steph was also thinking about the long-term financial impact of that business. And as an accountant, I can tell you that every business has a long-term financial goal. They want to earn more revenue, earn more profit, or even make a cost saving. But the problem with Steph being paid for the work that she was doing as a bookkeeper, like with many bookkeepers, is that she might have been charging an hourly rate. And if that was the case, would it matter whether Steph took 2 hours to find those savings or 40 hours to find those savings? I would argue that it didn't matter how long it took her. What mattered was the long-term financial future of that company. Yet, if Steph was paid by the hour, she would actually earn less if she was able to find those savings in 2 hours. That means that experts are being penalised when they work less hours because we can't reflect the value that they are worth in their pay. In the UK, the average male works 35 hours a week. The average female works 27 hours a week. If they had the same skills and expertise and could contribute to the same long-term financial impact for the business that they are working for, does that mean that the woman is worth only 78% of the man's pay? And this isn't going to be just a female problem anymore. We now have AI or LLMs, we have robots, we have technology and software that can do the work that you have trained for years to do much quicker or while you're asleep. If we don't need to work 9 to 5 anymore to complete the traditional version of the job that we were doing, how are we going to pay humans in the future? We need to find a way to value impact. That's what's going to matter going forwards. So how do we do that? Let me tell you about my first job, where I got to wear a suit. I was an estate agent, and I was a Saturday girl. And the job that I had to do was to understand all of the properties that we had for sale. And then I would ring up people from our database and convince them that this was a house they needed to see this weekend. Then, when I got them through the door of the house, I had to show them around and convince them that this was their dream house and they had to put an offer in right now. I was paid in 2 ways for that work. I was paid a base salary that reflected the skills and expertise that I brought to the job. And then I was also paid a percentage of the commission that the estate agency received when that property was sold. Under that model, I had no incentive to spend 10 weeks trying to sell the same property. In fact, if I could get the right person through the door on Saturday morning and sell the house to them, I could focus on selling a different house on Saturday afternoon. And this is a model that we've been trying to replicate for years. We've been trying to do this with bonuses and commission and tips. But the problem with those systems is that they are prone to bias. But now, with smart contracts on blockchain, we are able to accurately reflect the impact and the metrics that people are achieving in their work through rewards and remuneration. So how could we apply a model like this to the way that we pay work instead? Have you ever been to a coffee shop where the tables are filthy and you just decide you're going to get your coffee to go instead? How different might it be if, rather than being paid by the hour, the staff in the coffee shop were paid a base salary that reflected the skills and expertise that they brought to the job, plus a percentage of the takings of the shop for the end of the day? Don't you think that if they were paid in that way, they would spend more time thinking about how can they make you feel more comfortable as a customer, so you spend a bit more time, buy an extra coffee, maybe stick around for lunch? How different would it be for my mum if she had been paid a base fee for each bed that she made available, and then a percentage of the commission that the language school received when those people made repeat bookings in the future? How different would the whole customer service be through that model for all of the families in our seaside town who are hosting language students? How different could it be for female professionals like me who feel we have to leave the workforce because we can't make a 9 to 5 work, if rather than being paid for the hours we sit at our desks, we are paid a fee that reflects the skills and expertise we bring to the job, and then a percentage tied to the long-term financial outcomes of the organisation that we are a part of? So what can you do? If you're a leader or a business owner or a manager, ask yourself, is there a way that I can tie this work to some kind of meaningful metric rather than the 9 to 5? If you are a friend or a colleague, tell the woman who is juggling everything and doubting herself that her value is in more than the 9 to 5 that she sits at her computer. I believe that the hourly rate is limiting our potential, And I know that when we start to recognise value, we will be able to start rewarding value. And when we reward value, we're going to have businesses that respect discretionary effort, which respect creativity and emotional intelligence. And that's how we're going to make a world of work that works for everybody in a way that is more meaningful than the 9 to 5. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.